People live fairly lonely lives, and they fill up their lives with compensatory things, which the big corporations provide for us through intensive propaganda from advertising. And so we are, in that sense, extremely consumer-oriented, but we're also then very competitively oriented because we have no grounding or center by which to judge what is and is not worthwhile, and whether or not we as human beings have dignity or not.
I think the first thing to say about the Greens is that they make sense. It's what people want. They want to be empowered in their own neighborhoods. They want to have jobs that they don't have to work 60 hours a week. I really feel that there is a sense of really representing where people want to go and what they really want.
For me, green politics represents a new kind of political organization. Traditional parties basically put professional politicians into structures to govern us. But we're talking about creating new structures where we govern ourselves.
Everybody's talking about this, and we shouldn't be as guilt-ridden about not having this thing. This is the challenge of the planet. This is how we're going to make a shift as a species, to bring ourselves together. That was one of the dreams of our country, and now it's coming to the front. So the Greens are working at it, and a lot of other groups are working at it, and together I think we'll have the social union. At that point, once we've learned to interact in a way that's going to empower us all, then I think we're going to be ready for the shift in power that's going to happen in this country, even on a bigger level than happened in Eastern Europe. So that's kind of the timeline that I see for social change.
I've been politically inactive ever since I was a student in college. I withdrew my vote because I felt that there was nowhere to put it that was viable, and I more or less resented what these people were doing. I could see a lot what was going on. I felt hopeless and powerless, and that it was beyond me to do anything.
The destruction of the natural world has really reached a crisis point. And increasing numbers of people in the society are finally coming to see that the way we've been living over the past generation especially simply cannot continue. That the continuation of life on Earth is compromised by our way of life to the point where dramatic changes are necessary.
It is our understanding that the basis of the green philosophical worldview is actually embedded in the understanding of Native people everywhere. That is the understanding that the earth is alive, that life is sacred, that everything is connected, and that we have a responsibility to be guardians of it.
The bioregional movement has existed for about 15 years and is made up of people who believe that the best motivation for people trying to think about how to heal the earth is our personal relationship with the place on the earth that we know the best. Bioregionalists have been engaged in different parts of the country in trying to understand how we can create ways of living that are grounded in the biological and ecological and social and cultural reality of the place where we live.
The German Greens could develop because of a broad misfeeling of people that environment was not regarded as essential and as a good to be preserved. We became a political party because it was the only way to force the other parties to deal with the environment. Otherwise it wouldn't have been happened.
We saw that the Greens in Germany were pulling together elements from a whole spectrum of different social movements that had emerged in the 1960s and early 70s. The peace movement, the feminist movement, various movements for cultural and racial autonomy and assertion of identity that were not so easily reducible to the economic questions that until the 60s were seen as the basis for all of social change.
If you look at the people who are in the Greens, I think you will find that many of them come from the women's movement, they come from the civil rights movement, we come from the anti-war movement, to name three of the streams that have fed into the Green movement. And they are in a position where we pretty much have to make our own publicity and have to put out our own news, because most of the mainstream media are pretty well aware of the international Green movement, but very often you will read stories about that movement and not even mention the fact that don't even mention the fact that there is an American expression of that.
I'm a member of the Green Letter Collective, which is both an independent magazine and provides a service for the Green Committees of Correspondence to provide all the locals and all the members throughout the country what news is happening, what people are doing, what issues they're grappling with, and give people a newspaper that'll help them organize in their local area so people can see, not only have ideas of how else to organize, have a forum to talk back and forth with organizers who are grappling with the same issues, but also have a magazine that inspires people to become active, and not only become active, but realize that they're part of a larger movement, so that you can both, you know, as the saying goes, act locally and think globally, where you don't think globally, you feel and realize that there's a whole, you know, there's a movement throughout the world of people that are trying to heal our relationship to nature and one another.
Since 1984, when we started the Committees of Correspondence, now called the Green Committees of Correspondence, we've had what you might call a pre-party organization. And the basic idea was we get people organized at the local level and we stay in touch with each other and, you know, gradually develop, you know, common understanding and organizational structures through which we can work together and begin to project our ideas out into the public and begin to start a debate in this country about our future.
Thinking about those groups, they are a coming together of a variety of individuals who are seeking some kind of answer in ecological terms to the political mess we're in, and some kind of political answer to the ecological mess we're in.
The problem with the Greens right now is that they can't see the combination or how to combine the two. And so I think that's a real creative step that we're moving into right now in our structure, is how to begin to create the two so that they both enhance each other and not inhibit the other.
I think the institutional Greens, which is what this gathering is about, an attempt to build an institution, are pretty easy characters to get along with. You know, they're doing what I'm doing, which is sort of flirting around the edges of alliances, trying to see what's there and try and use strengths and powers from different groups and organizations.
The biggest obstacles we face are getting ourselves together and organized to be able to present this alternative to the people. And I think once we're together to do that, we will get broad support. But in the United States, we face problems that they hadn't faced in Europe. First of all, we're continental in our scope. We have enormous ethnic diversity. And that's a problem that's throughout this society, and it's one we're going to have to solve within this alternative movement, this green movement. And that requires an organization that's just not about elections, but about all the other kinds of activities we can do to advance our program. And as we work together and struggle together and go through the good times and the bad times together, we get to know each other, and pretty soon we begin to trust each other. And once that trust is there, then we can really get down and talk about our politics. You know, what we think, what the other person or the other groups think, and jointly work out, you know, a common program.
There are other aspects to this for a successful party, and that would be for the Greens to engage in the next several years in serious building of alliances with kindred organizations, people of color, other movements in the environmental range, movements of social justice, movements for democracy. Okay, here could be a strategy. We work really hard to level the playing field, and we run candidates in selective races at the local level, state, or national level, where we think we have an opportunity to express a clear alternative to the powers that be.
So right now, the difficulty is we have to fit at least our politics into an old system. At the same time, we're trying to create a new system of politics. So, and that's what's very difficult. Not only are we trying to build it into an old system, but the system is making it absolutely as hard as it can for us to do it.
Well, in order to get the Greens going on campus, we've been tabling almost daily. We led a very strong voter registration drive up until the deadline. We had a lot of people interested in finding out more about it. We have a lot of other things sort of planned for the future, but right now we're really concentrating on the campaign and the election November 6th.
I think people have not felt represented for a long time, and that's part of that is that the two major political parties have come closer together in what they're saying because they're close together in who they're representing, which is really multinational corporate interest. And that's why we feel that it's impossible for either of the major parties to be reformed at this point. And we have to start a new party that's based from the beginning on a kind of social responsibility. The other thing that is impressing people is that there's many ways that they can get involved, and that this is not going to be the kind of party that disappears out of their lives in between elections. It's very inspiring. It certainly is what keeps me going, getting out there and talking to people, and people from every walk of life, even from the whole political spectrum.
Hi. My name is Mandy. Yeah, I know you. Well, I can't vote for splinter parties.
Why is that?
We have to take all elections.
Yeah.
I can't beat the system.
That's a shame that you feel that way.
Well, no, I didn't write the Constitution, and I can't change it, neither can you. So, we're stuck.
We're just going to get more of the same. That's the whole.
Yeah, right. Well, I understand that point of view.
Well, will you take this anyway?
Sure.
Okay. I understand where he's coming from. I don't agree with it. I think it's just going to mean that we continue to have the mediocrity that we have now.
Many of us in the Greens who have been involved in direct action movements in the past have been trying to see how we can bring these lessons into the Green movement. And our first attempt to do that was on the 20th anniversary of Earth Day in the spring of 1990, when about 2,000 people from all across the country, including many Greens, converged on Wall Street to bring the message that not only were individual personal lifestyle choices made by people in this country contributing to the destruction of the earth, but that there were very specific economic forces at work that were getting us in this situation.
Get a job.
Save the planet, get a real job!
went to Wall Street to say that the economic system that we live under makes it impossible for us to live in an ecologically sound manner. That the entire system is so oriented toward growth for the sake of growth, speculation for the sake of speculation, that no matter how ecological we choose to live as individuals, that we're forced to contribute to a system that's destroying the basis of life on Earth. Once again, by taking it to the streets, this time in New York on Wall Street, getting physically in the way of stockbrokers and other Wall Street operators going to work, we got a message out which was carried surprisingly well in newspapers, really from coast to coast, that there's a section of the environmental movement that sees that the roots of the environmental crisis are in not just individual lifestyles, but in all of the institutions that presently control the society that we live in.
The International Working Group was basically designed about a year and a half ago by the Committees of Correspondence, and that is allowing us to keep in contact with Greens all over the United States to help us facilitate information exchange with Greens abroad. The U.S. Green Movement, while it's been quite entrenched in building a domestic policy, has not been able to address enough attention to an international policy. In December of 1989, both Manu Lorenz and myself joined Phil Hill and introduced the U.S. Greens to the Brussels Conference of European Greens. What that did for us was opened our eyes to many issues that I think many of us were unaware of, helped put in perspective the way the Green Movement is building in Western Europe, the way that the Green Movement is amazingly building in Eastern Europe, demystify the things that we really went over there not knowing, and allow us to come back with the inspiration to try to put in focus and accelerate the kind of green program that many of us. And the goal is to collate exactly what is happening here in the U.S. and maybe in North America, and offer that information to the Eastern European Greens and begin exchange programs of information and people, but not just Europe in general. Where we want to have that information exchange, that flow, is with countries all over, and it should be mentioned that green groups are flourishing, in India, they're flourishing in South and Central America, in Asia. That the International Working Group is striving to collect as much information as possible from green groups and related environmental peace organizations from around the world that helps us design a foreign policy that would supplant the dated foreign policy that the United States seems to live by. But it's the vision of the IWG that I truly would like people to hear, that the fact that policy of the U.S. Greens needs to be shaped on what it is we want to do for foreign policy and what we want to do to help bring to the attention of people locally that the Green Movement is not just some phenomena abroad, that it is a phenomena right in their own backyard. There are quite a few lessons, I think, that we can learn. I think we should watch for the result that their movement yields, and that is the trials and tribulations of trying to organize a cohesive movement, because I think a lot of Greens have been codependent on De Grünen in Germany, that they would somehow build their success on the fact that Germany, the German Greens, were sort of the first party to have multiple seats, and that they were the ones always being spotted in the news, and yet then they usually help provide a backbone because of its history to Greens in other countries and here in the United States who say, see, we're part of something bigger and a success that is. And yet we somehow feel lonely and frustrated that it's only happening here, and it's not. It's happening everywhere.
The other thing we have to realize is that you cannot change the society fundamentally in the ways that the Greens are talking about through elections, because there's a lot more to the power structure than the elected offices of the state. There's the unelected bureaucracy, which can tie reforms up in red tape. There's the military, which is unelected, and they usually stand with the establishment and can come down violently on popular movements for change. And we can see that, in many places around the world. There's enormous power outside the political structure. There are large corporations and wealthy people who control major resources in the economy. And if, Greens get elected into government and start making reforms, and these people don't like it, they can disinvest. Capital can go on strike just like workers can. And they can wreck the economy where the Greens are trying to make changes, and then blame the Greens for the changes that are trying to be made, and come back the next election and discredit the Greens.
The money to influence the political process are still mostly in the hands of those people, and they have demonstrated time and again their willingness to use those weapons. And it is going to take a nonviolent resistance on a scale far beyond anything we've seen to date to turn the momentum in the direction of ecological, social, and economic sanity.
As Greens, we really believe what we say when we use the phrase, think globally, act locally. I think things that people do on a very personal level, in our own lives, and in the communities in which we live can have profound implications. That every community of people that becomes organized to resist the pressures to conform to the status quo, every new experiment in living more ecologically and creating more ecological institutions has the potential to be an important step in crystallizing this movement.
I think getting to a party from here involves the question of the leveling of the playing field as between us and the Democrats and Republicans. And that playing field is not fair, it's not level. We would need to have things like a tremendous reform of the electoral laws and ballot access. We would certainly have to have public funding of finances, of campaigns. There are other aspects to this for a successful party, and that would be for the Greens to engage in the next several years in serious building of alliances with kindred organizations, people of color, other movements in the environmental range, movements of social justice, movements for democracy. If we could somehow or other develop a congress of those movements, they would in turn then be a base for activists in the party, for a Green Rainbow Party or some other. We would like to have the name Green in it. But so it would be owned by a lot of different people. And on that basis, we would then have the makings of what the Republican Party became in the 1850s. And I think thus a new sort of political force, not just another third party, but a new political force.
The worldwide green movement is a part of a survival mechanism of Gaia, of our planet, to end the destruction, to counteract the destructive forces of economic growth and profit.
If the Greens are a strong force with their very different international consciousness, they, I think, will encourage Americans and encourage the other parties to really think in a different way about their global priorities and their global responsibilities.
Although the U.S. Green Movement has been lagging behind the rest of the world, I think we are kind of a linchpin in getting the world economy and international system transformed, because we are in the belly of the beast in a sense. This country's got the most powerful military, it's got the most powerful global corporations based here, and what happens here affects people all over the world.
I feel a strong affinity for the philosophical bases of green politics. But I don't want to get hung up on the word green. I would prefer, if I need to get hung up on words, I would prefer to get hung up or attached to words like freedom, liberation, truth, justice, and love. Those are words easy to speak and sometimes harder to act upon. But I think those are the heart of the green movement and the heart of any humane political movement that can actually make a difference in the world. And that's the work that we are doing now, and we certainly invite other people who feel this way to become part of the work.